Hey there guys, and you're back with IDED and Mal for our wrap-up for the Ghost in the Shell First Assault Online. We're basically going to be discussing some of the elements of the game that we feel we need improvement, our opinions on the game so far, and basically more information like that. Now, this is obviously based on the beta access that we currently have, and this is being recorded on the 27th of the 12th, 2015, just to make sure you're aware of when we're making these assertions. So, Mal, are you ready for this?
I'm ready for this. Let's jump into it. And I think, why don't we talk about because I think this is really important. Obviously, we'll cover game mechanics. We're going to talk about, the overall impressions and kind of make our recommendations of whether or not this is worth people's money, because it is important to note that for the beta, there is a cost associated to getting into the game. It's quite low, and the game will be free to play later on and supported by an in-game store. But there is a cost right now to get into the beta, so is the game worth the, folks' money? So we'll go over that. But I think the first thing, and for me this is really important because you're kind of like, I think, a self-declared super fan of Ghost in the Shell. I think that's a fair statement. So, and you've watched everything and you've read everything about it. I mean, you know Ghost in the Shell. So from your perspective, does the game feel authentic? Is it true to the property that it's based on?
Very good question, actually. It's a really hard one to answer as well, because Ghost in the Shell's got so many incarnations of the actual IP itself, because you've got the original sort of manga, which is where it all comes from. You've got the first film, which is quite an old film now, but is the one that really was the jump-off point for the whole series, and that's where it really started to garner a real big following. Not so much in the West, but obviously within its original country's origin, like Japan, it was got a massive following. And then when we got into the next stuff, like the Ghost in the Shell standalone complex, is where it started to really get a sort of a Western audience. And that, I suppose, I got into it at that stage where the first film came out, and then obviously I picked up the series afterwards. And because of that, I feel that the experience of the game as it is currently does feel quite closely associated with the IP. There's obviously some bits and pieces in there that don't quite feel right. I know for people who've watched the series and stuff like that, there must be no stuff like Bato's hair isn't right. It doesn't actually match up with how he looks in the actual series. But this is like me nitpicking minor points, I suppose, in regards to things that don't really work out. The fact that they've actually got the original voice cast voicing all the characters in the game, for me, was a massive plus. That was a really beautiful thing. They brought in the Tachikomas, which is a much loved sort of character from the series, or from at least from the actual Ghost in the Shell standalone complex Laughing Man and Individual 11 series. So those were sort of important factors. The abilities and stuff like that obviously have been limited to make it more of a gameplay aesthetic rather than it being completely tied to the original sort of concept, so to speak. Like for example, the armor that basically Motoko Kusanagi has, the Thermoptics, that in obviously the series is completely unlimited. There isn't a limit to how long she can use that for, and obviously it's the one of the most iconic ones, as I've addressed before. So I can understand they've had to limit certain elements. They've also had to introduce additional elements that they weren't really in existence throughout the series, and as far as I'm aware in the manga, like as I mentioned previously, Bato's got like a rocket launcher in his arm, and I've never seen that in any of the series. That's never come up ever. Tokuso with the Seeker drones is another thing, doesn't really ever happen. That's not been something that I've ever seen happen in any of the shows. But then I feel that's the things they had to do to sort of make it a fair base level for all the players. Everyone had to have a skill, and because of that they had to introduce these. But I suppose for an authentic experience perspective, I suppose that's my opinion. I feel it does cater to the fans, and people like myself obviously are going to get a lot of love from this title. But I suppose the real factor is that if it feels like an actual game, is it a worthwhile game in itself? Like, irregardless of the fact that we're looking at it from the Ghost in the Shell's perspective, do you feel that it's actually a good, like, sort of FPS in essence? Do you think that it's a worthwhile game?
It's interesting me going into this game with you, and not having been familiar with Ghost in the Shell. Of course, I think I have a different perspective because while I'm familiar with it, you're the expert on it. So you've got that. I think what you're saying is you've kind of got that fan experience as you're playing the game. So then, does the game itself hold up as an FPS? And I would say that. Yeah. I years ago played a ton of Counter-Strike, Source, and Day of Defeat, and games like that, even competitively. And back then, apparently, I had some skill. Now, I don't know where that went, but it's gone. But in any case, does it stack up as sort of a quote-unquote generic FPS? And I would say, yeah, it does. You know, it looks good. The aesthetics are there. It has quality audio. The pacing is good. You know, when we move into talking about, you know, game mechanics, I've got some concerns there, but no, I do think that it stands up as an FPS, and even when I'm getting my face smashed, which has happened more often than I would like, I still have enjoyed the game, especially the fact that, of course, you and I as friends can play it together, but no, I think it does stand up as a you know, quote unquote FPS on its own, you know, regardless of the brand that it's wrapped in.
Yeah, okay, so you feel if you had it side by side with something like CSGO, which is another team-based FPS, you feel that they're on a comparable level in essence?
I do think so, and you know, if somebody said, well, is it... Someone had mentioned in one of the comments for the videos a couple days ago had said, it's like a sci-fi version of Counter-Strike Source, and I was like, well, I think it's probably like more of a Counter-Strike Source meets Team Fortress meets sci-fi. That's the way I would describe it to somebody if they didn't know anything about Ghost in the Shell. And the reason I say that is because of the iconic characters and them each having an ability, and that part isn't really part of, you know, of traditionally of Counter-Strike, right? That the sort of iconic character stuff really came in more with the team-based mechanic games like Team Fortress 2.
Yeah, of course, yeah, because to give them that sort of unique feel to the characters beyond the weaponry. No, that does make sense, and I suppose I have to agree with you on that one. I suppose, you know, I've always got to try and put the hype aside to try and make a sort of a very objective decision about these sort of titles, because for me, obviously, I've got, you know, a big part of the fandom, so I find it hard to give it that kind of objective perspective, which is quite good. But so, in consideration with that, when we've obviously looked at stuff and comparing it to stuff like, as you say, like CSGO and other games, and we've, you know, people have mentioned that it's very similar to Blacklight and stuff like that. Do you feel that the actual mechanics behind it then really fit as well? Do you feel they're just as well polished as other games of its same genre?
I think that, and polish is a big thing. That's the key word here. And I think you said it in the intro. The game is still very much in development. It is in early access / beta. So that's kind of, we know the landscape going into it. So I think we'd have to kind of temper expectations based around that. Now, having said that, do the game mechanics work? I would say yes, and then depending on the game mode that you're playing in, because obviously you've got Team Deathmatch as it stands today. You have Team Deathmatch, you have Demolition, and you have
Conquest.
Yeah, and Terminal Conquest, which is, you know, basically a capture the flag. Yeah. And I think that those game modes work. The issue comes in with one of the, you know, there's a handful of concerns I have with the game as it stands today. And it's to me, it's about, you know, a balance is a problem, particularly with regards to iconic heroes. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I do have to agree with it. At the end of the day, there definitely does seem to be there is a few balancing issues in there beyond just the game mechanics aspects, I suppose, in the sense of the actual character aspects as well. There is obviously a balance issue. I suppose this is the whole thing once again for me, where it comes back to that hype situation. I get kind of blown away by the fact of actually playing with these, like, say, iconic characters for me, but then I don't really observe it from that perspective of actually looking at it in an objective fashion. This is why I suppose it was good that we managed to sort of cooperate on this little project that we've done here, because obviously you're giving it a more based level, like, gamer's perspective, whereas I'm coming in from it from the little kid waving his arms in the air like a manic little hyperactive child, loving up the fact that he's actually getting to play with something he's watched on TV. So I suppose that's the way it really comes back to for me. But yeah, so as you were saying with gamers, do you feel that 3 game modes so far is enough?
I think 3 game modes is enough. I mean, in fact, I'm not sure what other game mode I would introduce, but I do think it's enough. What's not enough, however, and kind of tied to this, there's not enough variety in the maps. The maps themselves,
yeah, very true.
Particularly, and I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, one of the terminal capture the flag. For those of you not familiar with the terminology, but one of the capture the flag maps One side has that distinct advantage of being able to go under that little tunnel and get to the first capture point.
I think it's Cyber Ward, isn't it?
I think so. And that, to me, I mean, it's not even a question of whether or not, it doesn't even matter what the teams are in terms of their levels, and I don't mean skill levels, I mean their levels in terms of like what abilities, and not just that, but like their weaponry and all that. Take all that aside and just say they're perfectly balanced teams. That map itself is unbalanced
in nature. Yeah, of course, because that one team has an advantage right from the get-go, which the other team has nothing that compensates for that on their side of the map.
Right.
And we've experienced that on quite a lot of occasions, haven't we? From both sides as well. We've experienced it having that advantage and not having that advantage. And when we have it, we always seem to be on the win from the start of that map because of that factor. It does, and the other team can't seem to pull it back because there's no way to get into that area of the map without being shot from this tiny little window that only one team have access to.
Right, so, exactly.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. The balance, just even in the overall maps, there's an issue there. Is most certainly very true. But do you then, so in the sense of balance, then do you feel the balance of the actual game modes themselves is fair?
I think now that I've had more exposure to it, if you'd asked me this, a week and a half ago, I would have said, no, they're not balanced at all. I don't, like Team Deathmatch, I was really not enjoying that at all, and I couldn't stand Terminal Conquest. Now, I don't feel that way about either of those game modes anymore, and I actually enjoy all three now, which is cool. But I do think because of the map piece of it, and because, and this ties into something else that we're going to need to talk about, with regards to how the teams balance, or, more apropos, don't balance, it snowballs so fast on Terminal Conquest. I mean, you
the
get
tank's overpowering, isn't it, at the end of the day?
Yeah. I mean, somebody gets that first capture point, they get the tank. It's if you can hack it, and if your team knows, okay, now it's vulnerable, let's take it down, and you manage to do that, that entire time you're trying to accomplish that goal, the other team is taking pot shots and taking out your people, and it's very difficult to recover even from the first capture point loss.
And just to chime in on that, that's to say with a full team as well, that you're approaching this from the full team perspective. If you've got 8 aside, it's hard enough. If you have less than that, let's say it's a 4v4, even with balanced teams, if someone's got that tank, that's almost equivalent of another 4 players on their side. It's almost like having double the amount of players on one side that you're facing off against. It's a steamroll experience, isn't it, really? That you just can't come back from it after that tank arrives, because there's just no way to get through to it. There's not enough damage output on your team at all just to deal with that, let alone the other players on the map.
That's an excellent point, because the game seemingly does not scale that tank based on anything. It just pops it out there, and it's as powerful as it is if it was 3v3 or if it was 8v8. And that that was a great point. It doesn't make any sense that tank is that powerful. It should scale to whatever player levels are out there.
Yeah, I completely agree with you on that one. That was the one thing I think we noticed early on when we were playing, and that really did make a massive impact on us playing that. I think we know of us really enjoyed that game mode because of that fact that if you aren't in a full map with a full team of well-skilled players, it became impossible. As soon as the other team captured the first point, that was it. The game was over from that point forwards, because you just couldn't come back from it. And without experienced players, it was just impossible to actually organise them. So, but putting all of that aside, so what do you feel is your favourite game mode so far? I know for me it's going to be, I'm going to have to say Demolition on it, but what did you feel was your favourite game mode so far?
No question, Demolition. It's just absolutely no question. And because it harkens back to, I guess, to my, team play with Counter-Strike when I used to play so much of that, and it was all about the team dynamic. So like, you and I very quickly, I felt like kind of got into a flow. Okay, tossing flashbang, and after about a dozen or so games, I didn't even have to say anything other than I'm throwing a flashbang, and then you knew responsively to move up, wait for it to pop, and take the corner, and then I would come behind you or whatever. It makes that team dynamic happen. Or
it forces it, doesn't it?
Yeah, it forces
it. Which is what it comes down to.
Exactly.
Everyone spawns at the same time, so they can't just do, as you pointed out several times during when we were playing. People just throw bodies the other game modes. They just keep throwing bodies. No one really works together because they don't really spawn as a team. Whereas in that game mode, you actually are forced into that team dynamic because everyone spawns together.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's no incentive in the other. I mean, you and I do. Like, we'll even in team deathmatch, we'll die and we'll kind of wait for the other guy to respawn, and then we'll move out again together because that's a smart way to play. But most people don't do that. They're in it for themselves. Whereas in Demolition, like you said, it's sort of the behavior changes based on that game mode, and it does sort of force a team-based mindset. Otherwise, you're going to get, slaughtered. And most people, after playing it a few times, pick up on that. What I do think's interesting, though, is that I think we can agree it's not a very popular game mode at this time.
No, definitely not. Yeah, I have to agree with you on that one. Every time we seem to queue for it, if we queued just for that, nobody really wanted it. And I had a lot of people comment on this saying that it doesn't balance well with the teams. I'm not 100% sure what they were addressing with that, because I don't know, I didn't really see the issue with it, but people did point out that there was situations with the team balancing situation where that just didn't happen with that game mode. They just said it was impossible to win because of that factor. I can't really say specifically what they're referring to, because I was finding it hard to notice that there was a specific, inaccuracy and unlevelness with the gameplay in that game mode. But people seem to have a real sort of a backstep, so to speak, when it came to trying to play that game mode. Nobody really wanted to do it, did they?
I think the biggest real issue there that nobody's saying is that they don't want to sit around and wait if they die early on. They don't want to sit around and wait till the match is over. They might have to conceivably wait, 4 or 5 minutes, and they don't want to do that. So I think that might even be segmented based on maybe the maturity and or attention span of who's playing, right? Who's the audience? So for, I'm making a few assumptions here, and I hope this doesn't offend people, but I would say that guys like us are looking for more of that team dynamic, and maybe the pace being a little slower, where it's more tactical than, the whole rush, get the next kill, that, because obviously the other game modes are more that way, right? Especially team deathmatch. That's all about rush in, get the kills. Oh, I got killed, run back out there. That's what it's about. Whereas Demolition's not. It's got a pace to it that once you learn the maps, there's very much tactical decisions that you will make. I'm running up from long B on such and such map. I know to throw a grenade, and then I know to step over to the right, and I know to wait 10 or 15 seconds before I move forward. I know that I've got to have someone cover the other side. To me, that's the exciting element of playing in that game mode, but I can see why others would not like it, because it does slow down the pace of the game.
So you feel that basically it appeals more to a more mature gamer? Is really where you're coming from on that point then? Is the game's more focused on that, it should be more focused on that sort of variety of people because of the team dynamic. It doesn't cater well to the one-man army situation.
Right, it just, again, it's almost a different game. And, it does, right? It is a game mode, so it is supposed to be different. And I think that with Demolition, it changes the game to be much more like, Counter-Strike, clearly. Is the influence there versus Terminal Conquest and or Team Deathmatch, which would be akin to other more just shoot 'em up FPS. And there's nothing wrong with it. Obviously, those are wildly popular, so of course they have those game modes in. But yeah, I'm with you. Hands down, Demolition is my favorite. And that I didn't believe I was going to say this, but probably my second is Team Deathmatch. I mean, the last couple of times we've played that, I've really enjoyed it, even when we've had, runs where we got slaughtered. We've also had runs where we've done really well, and I've enjoyed that too.
Yeah, I think once we got the sort of teamwork sorted out on that and learnt the maps a bit, I think that's a really big factor of any FPS game, is knowing the maps quite well. I actually really started to enjoy the team deathmatch, which is normally not my thing. I'm not a big PvP player as a whole in any game. I'm not a big PvP player, but I actually did start to really enjoy that. But I think that comes down to who you're playing with. And because we were on voice comms and stuff like that when we were playing, I found it a lot more fun than, if I was playing by myself, as the lone gamer, and then just trying to play and just trying to organize with random people without being able to talk to them and being able to have that kind of vocal communication. I feel that's where it would fall apart for me. I think that became really enjoyable because of having someone to play with in that sense.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It totally changes the experience. And that's the whole thing with online gaming, is that you get to share that experience with your friends, and you you cheer and support each other when you do well, and in defeats you can provide emotional support.
Or snappy comebacks.
Yeah. Well, whatever works.
And random abuse. Yeah.
Absolutely. But I think there's a lot of pluses. There are a lot of pluses to this game, and there's a lot in the pro column, but I think it's important, and also I think it's important to note that while there are a lot of YouTubers and streamers out there that have been compensated by Nexon to do their playthroughs and their first impressions and or reviews of this, IDED and I have not. So you're getting...
I was completely honest in essence.
You're getting completely unbiased, and we've really played the game. We've played a lot of hours of this game since it's come out. So I think our assessment is fair, and I think it is very much balanced, because you have one person that loves the IP that it's based on, and you have another person that loves team-based tactical FPS. So you're getting a balanced approach. But we got to talk about the cons. And for me, hands down, the biggest concern, and I think the vast majority of chat that we've seen is also in-game has addressed this, is that the auto-matching doesn't work. Like how the rooms fill up or don't fill up doesn't really work.
The team balance doesn't have as you point out, it's kind of there as a feel-good sort of thing, isn't it? Like a piece of supportive text that says, hey, there's auto-balance here.
Oh, yeah, I've said that a couple times. It's like, it only says auto-balance on the screen so that you feel warm and fuzzy for a moment. Like, no, it does auto-balance. It's there. Yeah, it's like, no, it does. There's no auto-balance. So if you, now, of course, the good thing is that if you're in a quick dive match and you happen to go through a match, and this has happened to us, and you go through, and then obviously one team wins, one team loses, or well, actually you can get a draw. We've had that happen. But if you do end up with two teams that are balanced, if they all stay in that lobby, they'll then launch into another game. So that's good, but that's very much luck of the draw, and it's not based on the system at all doing what it should be doing.
I feel this, just to explain that auto-balance situation, the way it seems to work at the moment, or what we've observed of the mechanics of it, is that auto-balance only counts when people are joining the lobby. So it doesn't take into account people's skill levels, the level of their characters or anything like that. It only seems to take into account the number of players on each team, and it only does it at the point of joining. It never rebalances after people join. So let's say if 8 people join on one side, 8 people join on the other side, then one side loses 4 players. It won't move 2 players from one team to the other to balance out the sides again. It will just do it as people join from that point forwards. They'll just get all of them will go onto this one side. And that's, I think, where it's falling apart, is that it doesn't take into consideration who's currently in the lobby, just what's happening when people join the lobby.
And I think that we can agree, and obviously you have a technical programming background, so I think we can agree that that's just kind of rubbish. That's just sloppy programming.
Yeah, I do agree. I know, I understand it's mostly quite a complex thing to do, because it's got to take into account, like, let's say, like we were playing where we were joining a lobby together, so you want to stay on the same team. It's got to take those sort of things into consideration when balancing the teams. But if a lot of people are playing a solo, there's no reason to not reorganize, even if it's the point where everyone joins the actual match itself. When you actually load in, it would still be easy enough to reorganize and resort those teams, taking that into account. It's not a complex system to do it. It is just a sort and just a, make sure both sides have equal numbers, if not one above the other by one player. It should never be more than that above each other. It shouldn't be, well, we've had before, there's been us 3 on one team, like you, me, and some randomer on a team, and then 8 people on the other side. And it's unbelievable to think that the game will let that happen and continue to let people play in that fashion. It's absolutely insane.
The only thing, quote unquote, good about that would be that it was a game mode that would end quickly. Like, if you hit a really unbalanced team like that, you hope it's demolition, or you hope it's terminal conquest, and that your pain will be over easy. Because otherwise, and this is important to note, if you're like, oh, this isn't fair, I'm not going to do this. If you exit out of the game and you've invested some time in it, you also don't get any experience or rewards for that round. So you're in a situation where, well, I can go through the pain, hopefully quickly, and get a little bit of experience, and then hopefully find another group, right? Like a random dive to find more balanced teams. Or you can dump out of it and not get anything.
Yeah,
so
that is the truth of the matter, isn't it, at the end of the day?
Yeah.
So talking about the balance situation, then beyond just the actual auto balance of matches and the game modes themselves, I suppose we should address the characters as well in there, and because we've had the opportunity now to pretty much try out reasonably all of the characters. I think we've had a go at most of them. I've unlocked, I think, about 90% of all the characters on there and tried each one of them. And there are certain characters that do feel overpowered, wouldn't you say?
Well, okay, I wish I had been recording it so that I could show this, but case in point, last night we were playing, and I said, you know what, I'm going to try out Borma, because that nanogel armor seems really good, right? Like, almost too good. And I went on an 8, it was either an 8 or a 9 kill streak. And I actually fought 3 guys at once. I shot one guy in the head, I shot another guy in the torso and killed him, and then I managed to come around the corner and kill another guy in the head in the span of, like, I don't know, maybe 15 or 20 seconds, and all of those guys were shooting at me. It wasn't like I was taking cover and playing smart, or, you know what I mean? It wasn't like I was all of a sudden a super good player, and then I proceeded to kill, like I said, I think up to 8 or 9 in a row, and it was with nanogel armor active. I didn't all of a sudden get better at the game, it's just that thing seems... It really does seem unbalanced. I mean, it was...
Before we continue on that, I think maybe you could explain what nanogel armor actually does, because the name itself is very deceptive. It makes you feel it's some form of armor, which it's not, is it? At the end of the day?
It's not. It's massive health regen. So if you move around, and that's the key, actually, because if you stand stationary, it's not all that powerful. I kept running. I was sort of running, and I kind of ran half circles around these guys and was shooting them. So as I was taking random hits, because obviously I was moving, all their shots weren't hitting, I was getting lower and lower on health, but the nanogel was regenning my health. So I'd get almost close to death, but the nanogel would save me. I'd get almost close to death, and nanogel would save me. And then once I got clear of those first 3 and I ran further into the map, by the time I encountered the next person, I was up to 110 health. Like before, so it's ridiculous. It's like I became the Hulk or something.
Yeah, because I didn't notice it also seems to push you beyond the standard health, isn't it? Because the standard health's 100 health, isn't it?
Correct.
And with nanogel, you can get up to 110 health, which means not only does it regenerate, because it only takes like a couple of seconds, doesn't it, to get you up to 100 health from like almost dead.
Correct. Yeah, and it's very fast.
On top of that, you also get an extra 10 health as well to benefit you whilst you're in that game mode, so to speak, whilst you're using that special ability, as you should call it, I suppose.
Right. And then don't forget, there's those other, which we really haven't talked about, but there's those socketed boosters for different things that burn out. And I had put some of those on as well. So between nanogel armor and those little, boosters and stuff, I mean...
like the 20% damage reduction.
Yeah,
and stuff
that kind of stuff.
You can power game extremely well with that character, can't you? Really, you
use
the hell out of it.
It was ridiculous. I had a grenade go off like right at the 5-meter range, which is where it would normally kill you. Within 5 meters, a grenade will kill you. It didn't kill me. I had the 20%, or it was either 10 or 20% reduction to shrapnel damage, so I took less grenade damage from the booster. And then I had nanogel active. So here a grenade basically drops technically at my feet, right? Or within the range. I take the damage. I hide behind, it was like a generator or something, with hard cover. A couple seconds later, I'm back at full health. I go around and I kill the guy that had thrown the perfect grenade. Now, he should have, in my opinion, he should have gotten that kill. He timed the grenade perfect. It landed within range and it went off. I should have died, but I didn't. And he died because I had nanogel and some boosters. To me, that's bad balance.
Yeah, I do admit that, and it also negates other people's abilities, doesn't it? Like Toga's has the Seeker drones, and with the nanogel, you can actually survive the Seeker drone explosion, which is surprising because that normally is an instant kill, isn't it? By being anywhere near it, you should instantly die. But generally, you seem to be able to avoid it with that, which is it kind of renders other people's abilities almost pointless at the same time. Right.
Yeah. Absolutely. So it's not only just the issue of that's too good. It like you said, other iconic characters, their hero powers then seem, pointless, really.
Yeah, underpowered. And admittedly, there are some other characters that their powers do seem like not so much limited, because there are some cool things that go with it, as you were saying about like the add-ons. Like Toga's got the Seeker drones, and both of us had like the opportunity to try out some of the additional extras for that, didn't we? Like there's a camera mod that allows you to then suddenly use that, not only be able to kill people with them, but you can then see where they're going and stuff, which was kind of a cool addition. There was things that increased its speed, increased its how far it would go before it destroyed itself. So those socketed bonuses really do allow people to power game if you can get them, but they are kind of hard, I have to admit, to get. They don't come into play very often, the like sort of the specialist ones for that character.
Right, exactly.
And so, well, let's have a look at the other ones then. So, Bato, he's got the rocket arm. Now, that, to me, I think that seemed overly overpowered, and I think that was one of the biggest complaints we saw in the chat when we were playing, was that people felt that that was way overpowered, because not only does it have like the AoE damage is quite significant, more than a grenade would kill, basically, which you'd expect from it, but it was the range, wasn't it, at the end of the day?
Oh, well, not only the fact that you could fire it basically across the map like a sniper rifle, let's just set that aside as being, that's just silly. I mean, that's just silly. But yes, the AoE damage range, I don't even know what it is. You're safe at 6 meters, or safe-ish at 6 meters for a grenade. For that rocket, I've been what appears to be, like 8 meters, 9 meters away, and still died. Like how, like I'll watch the rocket fly past me, like significant distance behind me, and like hit a wall and go off, and I die. And I'm like, what? What just happened? That doesn't make, I mean, that's another one that it absolutely needs to be looked at. And I think the vast majority of players would agree with that.
Yeah, the other characters, though, I feel, they do seem reasonably balanced now. Motoko Kusanagi, who's obviously the lead character from the series and stuff, known as the Major, her one's like the Thermoptic armor. It lasts for a short period of time. You're invisible as long as you're staying still, but you get some sort of like a base outline, don't you, really, when you're kind of moving?
Yeah,
so it dissipates more and more the faster you move. So that one seemed reasonably fair. The Sprinter, same sort of deal. Yes, you could get to people a lot quicker, but then the aiming reticle obviously goes much larger, so you can't even hit anything when you're using it. So it's kind of a knife-only situation with that. And admittedly, that seems to be the nature of that character, doesn't it? Everyone who uses the Sprinter seems to always go for knife kills. No one ever tries to shoot anyone when using that power.
Right, and it's kind of a non-issue because it lasts such a brief amount of time. And if you pay attention, because there are announcements, right? Enemy is using hyperspeed. If you listen to those audio cues from the game, then to be kind of on guard for a speedster to come. And if like 2 people stand side by side, like you and I do often, you could kill them before they get to you with a knife, even with hyperspeed. So I feel like, I agree with you. I feel like that's balanced. The guy that puts the sentry down, the sentry, I feel is balanced. It might have a little too much health, but it doesn't do a ton of damage, and you can avoid it. It doesn't have 360 ability to fire, so you can avoid it. So that seems reasonable. Yeah. I agree with you.
There's a couple that feel a bit underpowered as well, though, isn't there? Because the guy, Saito, who's the sniper from the series, he's got a sort of like a heat sensor, isn't he? Which, as you were saying earlier about it doesn't last very long. His one doesn't last very long at all. And then in addition to that, it only shows up people in waves. It's like I don't know how long would you estimate is between the waves? About 5 seconds?
Something like that. And yes, it's really, it's good. It's powerful. And if teams are working together, it's very useful. But it's limited. It's not. It's a good example of a team-based support skill that is balanced in line with the others. It's not an out. It's not. I don't feel like it's an outlier. You could argue that it's actually underpowered because it doesn't last long enough.
Yeah, it doesn't last long, and because I think the segregation between the waves, I found was too long. It was very rarely extremely useful because you couldn't see when someone was coming around a corner unless they happened to be going around the corner when that wave of like heat sensor went out. Otherwise, you've got enough time for them to fade off, and then you don't know where anyone is again before the next wave happens. And in that time, there was enough time if someone's sprinting or someone's moving quite rapidly, they could then be in a completely different location, and so it was of no assistance whatsoever. And the fact that it only lasts for like maybe, I think you got maybe 3 or 4 waves out of it before it's done. So you only get to know people's locations about 4 times, and then it's only if you're looking in that direction when the wave goes out as well, because it seemed to have an arc.
Right.
It wasn't 360, it was only in the direction you're looking at the time. So if someone's behind you and you flick around after the wave, you wouldn't know they're there, and it kind of gives you that feel that you should have known, like it should still be showing those people up, but it doesn't. So you can get attacked from behind by people with that ability on, and have no knowledge of their existence in that area, which I felt was, I don't know, for me that's what makes it feel a little bit more underpowered rather than balanced, so to speak.
I get your point. And I would stipulate, and I stipulate that that's one that maybe needs a little bit of love. But I think the biggest thing is that I think we can agree it's certainly not overpowered.
No, definitely not. And what other characters have we not discussed in the sense of powers? So we've looked at Togusa, we've looked at Saito, because that's the drones. We've looked at the heat sensor, we've looked at the rocket arm, we've looked at the drone, the thermoptic camouflage, we've looked at the sprinter. Have we missed one there? I think we most probably have, but I can't remember any additional ones off the top of my head. We've looked at nanogel. I think we've pretty much covered all of the major players in that sense when it comes down to it. So I suppose maybe we should move on to the next sort of section of our discussion, so to speak. So we've sort of discussed some of our concerns when it comes to the auto balance and stuff like that. But there's also some other sort of inherent issues that we've encountered as well with sort of server stability and the sort of RNG on the guns and stuff. And obviously, what's your opinion on those sort of sides of things as well?
Well, from the server stability point, we've had the servers go down a couple times on us and not been able to log back in. There's also been a desync issue that is weird. It's like it'll get localized to a match that we're in and will shift from player to player. It's very odd, and they'll be like walking through buildings and literally like clipping and walking right off the map, but it will show that they're still alive. And they think they're still alive, and you can empty a clip into them, and nothing happens. So that desync issue is still there. But I mean, I think also too, it is a beta. So I think we got to kind of take that with a grain of salt.
Yeah, we've got to give them their dues where it is, because obviously the fact it is still in a very sort of early access position at the moment, which means that when we can't expect everything to be 100% working as good as it would be in a released title, I suppose. So I suppose we can give them that, because we have had a couple of times where we've joined a match and we've been kicked out as soon as we joined. I think we had that once or twice, didn't we, where it just dropped us straight back to the lobby as soon as the match started, which was a weird issue. Yeah,
that was odd, and it took us off guard.
And it's I think one of the other things to sort of go in with the desync issue that you've mentioned is we've encountered a couple of times sort of, it's hard to tell if it's a desync or if there's an issue with the gun's accuracy, because I know there's obviously stats that are in relation to the accuracy of each gun and stuff, so if bullets hit or don't hit, but then it's also hard to tell if that's the game mechanic doing that or if that's the desync issue that means you don't hit people when you're stood right next to them firing bullets into their face as far as you're concerned, yet they don't seem to take any damage. And so
the hit boxes are off.
Yeah, because it's caused issue a few times where we're not sure if someone's sort of like hacking or something like that, because we've been shooting them and on your screen it shows the little blood splats when you hit them, but then when you die and it goes to the view from them, you get to see them like sort of close up for a few seconds. They've still got 100% health, but you saw the blood splats happen when you hit them. So as far as you're concerned, you should have done damage, so it's hard to tell if that's a desync issue, if it's because they're using nanogel, or if it's some other inherent issue there that's causing that problem. And I know we've encountered that quite a few times when we've been playing, which makes the game feel a little bit uneasy in the sense of you don't know if you're really doing anything or not, if you're the one who's getting the desync, if they're the one that's getting the desync, or if there's someone doing something a little bit untoward, I suppose, in there.
Well, and I do not have a lot of experience with this particular publisher, but I've had several people tell me that other games that Nexon has produced have had issues with hacking, and I think every game does to some extent, but apparently that's ruined the experience of some of their other games. Now, it is important to note that when you log into this, that there is some kind of anti-hacking client that runs before the game launches, so it sounds like from the onset that they're trying to address that. So I don't know that hacking is really a big issue. I tend to take the same viewpoint that you do, that it's really more of there's a net stability issue going on and some kind of desync that's creating these issues, and the hitboxes need to be refined, because to your point, you'll have somebody dead to rights and just empty your gun into someone, and then when it does flip to them, it's like nothing happened. It's like, well, what? No, I saw what happened. So yeah, I agree that that's something that and I'm sure that that they are going to work on that. That seems like a no-brainer.
Okay, and so overall, the impressions of the game, I think we've covered pretty much everything we can do in regards to sort of summing up this game for everyone out there. Myself, I feel the game is fun. I enjoyed it. It's playable in essence. I feel there's a lot of improvements still yet to be made myself. with doing it. I would still like to see, like, as I said in some of the forum posts on this, I'd like to see like a PvE mode more focused around the actual IP itself, working with a team of the guys from Section 9 to sort of play through missions more like a Deus Ex Machina style feel game, which is something I would like. But obviously this is once again the hype of being part of the fandom, and I would like to see these things happen because that's what I want from a game. But what's your overall feel of the game when it comes down to it?
Well, first off, to address what you just said, I would love not being a massive fan of Ghost in the Shell, though I do like it. I think it's very cool. I would love to have a cooperative PvE mode that's story-based. I think that that's something that they could do to sort of further, separate themselves from the field, so to speak. And they've got this great IP that they're obviously paying for its use. I would certainly run some kind of story mode co-op there. It seems like something that would be a natural extension of what they're doing, and maybe they will. I haven't seen anything from the devs regarding that, so maybe we should try to reach out to them and get an answer on that, because I think that would be awesome. As to the game itself, I think it's the word that keeps popping into my head is serviceable. In other words, it gets the job done. It looks good. Sound is good. The voice actors that came from the actual films and whatnot, that's a nice touch. I agree with you. So it has a pretty good level of refinement for a beta, and I think it's important to note the entry level to get into this thing, and it was just on sale on Steam. Even when it's not on sale, it's $5 to get into the beta, and then after that, when it launches, it's going to be free to play. So I guess I take the stance of it's fun. I agree with you. I've had fun playing it. If it's free to play, yes, you might buy some things from the market or what have you and invest in the game, but you don't have to. And I don't know if they're going to change how you earn XP and unlock items, but I don't have any problem so far with the pace of unlocking weapons. I only did the $5 deal to get into the game, so I basically started with nothing, and I have, a nice assault rifle in the Scar, and it's modified at this point. I've almost unlocked all of the at least baseline accessories for it. And I have spent basically none of the money I've earned as I've leveled up. So I think from that perspective, right now they have it dialed in. I hope they don't make it where it really becomes pay to play. That's an ongoing concern, but I don't know what's going to happen with it. So I guess overall, my impression is it's a serviceable game. I think that if you're an FPS fan, you will enjoy it. If you're a Ghost in the Shell fan, you will likely enjoy it. If you're a fan of both genres, you will enjoy it. And the entry fee is so low, I see no reason why you shouldn't try it.
Yeah, I have to agree with you on that one. And none of it's unavailable to players when it comes down to it. Everything that you can get in the game can be done via just playing the game itself. So if you don't want to throw money at it, you can just earn it by playing. But still, nonetheless, then I suppose we should really wrap this one up, shouldn't we, buddy?
Yeah, okay. So here's what we're going to do, folks. We're going to kind of leave the door open to revisit this. This was sort of a mini-series for us. And since the game is still in active development, I think IDED and I will continue to play it because we like the game. And then based on what kind of feedback we get from you, we may put up more videos about that during the beta. But I think what'll happen is if they release sort of a big content push, or it moves from early access to actual launch, at some point when it's appropriate, we'll probably come back to visit this game and bring along some of our other friends and see if we can't get even more of a team dynamic and drop as a full team and whatnot. So I hope that you have enjoyed this and you've found this series interesting. If you have, consider hitting that thumbs up. We would really appreciate it. Just reach up, click. It takes you 2 seconds. No big deal. Just click. You're good. All right. And for myself and for my buddy IDED, thank you so much for watching, and we will see you later.
See you soon.